Hello everyone, we are on week 3 of Technology Management 512. This week we are covering chapter 2 of your textbook, The Art and Science of Leadership by Afsane Nahavandi. So the first part of the semester will be all from this textbook. So if you haven't purchased one, please do so as soon as possible, because last week you were supposed to read chapter 1 and this week you are supposed to read chapter 2. So please buy it as soon as possible. So chapter 2 is basically global and cultural contexts. What is the impact of different cultures on leadership styles? This is very important, especially considering cultural diversity in work environments these days. I mean, everywhere is multicultural. So impact of culture on leadership style is very, very important. The objectives of this week are defining culture. What is culture? What are the levels of culture? What are the roles of culture in leadership? And then we will learn models of natural culture to leadership, which is Hall's cultural context, Hofstede's dimensions, Trompenaar's model, and Globe research. And then we will identify the impact of gender on leadership and address how leaders can develop a cultural mindset and present the steps organizations can take to become more multicultural, to have an organizational multicultural mindset. This is the leadership question that you need to first think about it, write down your answer on a piece of paper, and when you finish watching this lecture and reading your textbook, you will understand the answer that was expected from you for this question. There is not a right or wrong answer, but there is an effective answer and ineffective answer. So you will see what is an effective answer to this question. What are the elements of culture? First, culture is shared by group members, transferred from one to another. It affects thinking and behavior, and it's stable and dynamic. Okay. So first you need to understand what is culture, what are elements of culture, what is definition of culture. For that, please read your textbook. I cannot go through these definitions on this video lecture. It's your responsibility to read everything on the textbook. So there are 3 levels of culture identified. There is national culture, team culture or group culture, and this is also ethnic culture, because every nation has some ethnic groups that has their own culture. Okay, and then there's organizational culture. So there are 3 levels. Okay, then let's start with the models of culture. Okay, the first one is Hall's cultural context. Hall's model is based on the communication context. Context here means the environment and the information that provides the base of interaction communication. Members of high context cultures, as you can see here, I'm just going to give a quick summary. Basically, they rely on non-verbal cues. What can that be? Tone of voice, body posture, gestures, and situational factors such as the status, the titles. Okay, so there's a hierarchy to communicate. The low context cultures, on the other hand, focus on explicit messages like written documents, verbal messages, and clearly stated expectations. When you look at figure 2.2 in your textbook, you will see these contexts comparing high context and low context in detail. Okay, all these are important terms under high context and under low context cultures. And what is very important here is their intersection region. Okay, so the situation. Why is it important? Because remember, leadership, remember from first chapter, leadership approaches should be determined based on the situation of the, if it's a project, the leadership approach should be based on the situation related to that project, specific project. The second one, Hofstede's cultural dimensions. Hofstede divided culture, classified culture in 5 dimensions. First one is individualism versus collectivism, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity, and time orientation. These are all very important cultural dimensions. So basically, individualism is, so the societies, the cultures focus on self-achievement. Okay, individuals rely on themselves, each individual, and they focus on their self-achievement. Their number one priority is self-achievement. Okay. Power distance cultures. The power distance basically is the extent to which people accept unequal distribution of power. So what I mean is, if power distance is high, that means there's a wider gap between the powerful and the powerless people. This is kind of like communism, communist cultures, nations. If the power distance is low, that means there is a smaller gap between the powerful and the powerless. Uncertainty avoidance is very related to risk management, how much the culture accepts risk, how much they require certainty in their decisions, okay? How much they require absolute truths, okay? Masculinity, on the other hand, is how much culture focuses on sex role differentiation, gender differentiation, how much they focus on independence, ambition, materialism. The last one, time orientation. What is the cultures, that specific cultures focus in terms of time? Do they focus on the past? Do they focus on the present? Or do they focus on future? So if they focus on future, that means, are they worried about short-term performance or long-term performance? Of course, if they are worried on future, they are basically focusing on long-term performance. But trust me, there are many cultures out there that are very short-term oriented, focus on short-term performance. So that's why Hofstede put this 5th dimension of time orientation. It's very, very important. Okay, go through this. I already explained them for you. The last one, I'm not last one, but the Trompenaars dimensions of culture, it's also similar. Actually, before coming to Trompenaars, let's talk about Harry Triandis's extension to Hofstede's cultural dimensions. Okay, so Hofstede, after that, Harry Triandis refined the model by adding the concept of tight and loose cultures and the vertical and horizontal dimension to individual and collectivism. So if you, let's draw it, let's say okay, there is equality, Okay, I'm gonna divide this into 4 regions. This part is equality, this part is focus on hierarchy, let me put this a little bit here. Okay, equality, hierarchy. Here there is collectivist, and now what is the opposite of collectivist? Individualist, right? All right, sorry for being slow, this software is a little hard to use. Okay, so that means some cultures are focused on individuals more, self-performance, whereas some cultures focus on the team performance, organization performance, group performance. Okay, and some cultures pay a lot of attention to hierarchy, status, titles, ranks between people. But in some cultures, ranking, hierarchy is not an issue at all. Everybody is assumed equal. An example to collectivists with very high attention to hierarchy, which country would that be? Of course, there are lots of examples, but the example we will give here is Japan. Okay, hierarchy is very important. Ranking is very important. There is a lot of respect for supervisors, leaders, but the main goal of each member, the culture, is overall success, the team success. Okay, another collectivist culture but doesn't really care about hierarchy in the teams is Israel. It's a very, very good example. What about an individualist culture that people really focus on self-success, self-achievements, rather than really worried about organizations? USA is a good example for this, and in USA also ranking is important, right? Your supervisors, your leaders, people pay a lot of attention to that. Tell me a culture that has equality in terms of in the teams. The ranking is not very important. Nobody cares about titles, status, but people worry about self-success more. Sweden. Okay, these are very subjective. If you don't agree with it, you can change these countries. You can think that USA is there. Okay, these are all subjective. These are my opinions, just to give an example, just to explain you what is Trianda's dimensions for culture are. Going back to the lecture, okay, the next one is Trompener's cross-cultural organizational cultures. This is also similar. Okay, a factor is person or task orientation. Okay, and equality versus hierarchy. So it's actually very similar to the previous one, right? So make sure you understand what each region explains to you. Read your textbook and these little notes. The last one is the globe research. It's the most current, most extensive research on cultural dimensions and proposes cultural values to help understand different cultures. Okay, so the dimensions are power distance, Uncertainty avoidance, we already know what these are. Human orientation. There are two collectivism. The one is institutional, the second one is group. Okay. There is assertiveness, gender egalitarianism, that's very hard to pronounce, future orientation, and performance orientation. Okay. All these terms are self-explanatory. Okay, you can understand what they mean just by reading the words, but also try to read these meanings and go to your textbook to read in detail. Okay, this shows how different regions, this is from a study for Globe, how different regions shows different dimensions of culture. Okay, can you imagine being a leader in a team that there is a member from each regions? How are you gonna behave, right? All of the members will have a different cultural dimension, expectations from you, work habits, right? So your leadership should be multicultural. So there are also some CLTs on this Globe research. They are basically culturally endorsed theory of leadership. Okay, so the leader has to be charismatic and value based, which means performance based leadership, team oriented leadership, participative leadership, which means leader pay a lot of attention to followers' ideas, humane oriented means leader pays a lot of attention to the followers' feelings, ambitions. Autonomous is very independent leadership. Self-protective is the leader actually pay a lot of attention for safety and security of the followers. Okay, you have to read all this from the textbook, very important. So there are some examples here, like comparing different regions. Okay, just go through this and think about which region you fall. Most of you are from United States or India, I think. So find your region and read through the dimensions and think about it if this matches you, okay, your culture. Not specifically you, but your culture. So the next issue is gender inequality, okay? Because different cultures have different gender stereotyping, it's very important topic. Okay, what I'm gonna tell you here is these are suggested causes for gender inequality in organizations from different resources. Okay, the real causes that impacts gender inequality in organizations are these three. Okay, because there's discrimination, because there is stereotyping, and also because women are still expected to take care of the house, the kids. There's a gender inequality in organizations. But if someone tells you that there are gender inequality because females are not effective, females are not committed to work or less educated, that's completely wrong. Okay, that's rejected. So these three are rejected, but these three are the true causes. We have to get rid of this discrimination and stereotyping to establish gender equality in organizations. This is not just specific for United States, this is for whole world. Okay, so the leadership question in the beginning of the lecture was, what is considered effective leadership? Depends on the cultural context. Do you think there are some leadership gold standards, key standards, some characteristics and behaviors that all cultures must demonstrate? Okay, so what is the answer? What is the textbook answer? Let's say that, what is the textbook answer? The gold standards are integrity, I'm gonna change honesty to ethics, okay, and trustworthiness. So all cultures throughout the world, global cultures, all of them expect integrity, honesty, and trustworthiness from leaders, from effective leaders. And then the next topic is the cultural mindset. This is just saying that considering the multicultural basis of every teamwork, every organizations these days, a leader must have a cultural mindset. So what is a cultural mindset? The leaders have to be aware that cultures, different people's cultures affect their expectations from leaders. Okay, so they need to make necessary modifications and a team understanding that each person has a different cultural background. You have to use those differences, the diversity, for the goodness of your project. These are the characteristics of the cultural mindset. There are cognition, behavior, and skill sets. Please read through this, very important. And then how to be a multicultural organization, an effective multicultural organization. First, you need a culturally minded leader. Okay, very important. So from this chapter, what we learned, if you're gonna be a leader, you have to be a culturally minded leader. And of course, these are necessary factors, okay, for the overall organization to be effective. But the bottom line, most important part, is the leaders has to be culturally minded. They need to have a cultural mindset. Okay, so that's it for this week. Please read chapter 2 and work on your assignments. Thanks for listening to me. Have a great week.